edition of Listen Up a Minute. I'm Dr. Burt, and we're so excited to be here again this evening, and I'm with my co-host,
Bill McGee.
We have a very, very special guest with us, Mr. Terrence Affer Anderson, and I think Bill is going to talk to him a little bit about his background and why he's here with us this evening.
And I want to talk to my dear brother Terrence about his background and his career in film and in play as a playwright and as a screenwriter or screenplay writer, I guess that's what you'd say. But we're going to have him just tell you a little bit about himself. Then we're going to talk about a movie that we all had a chance to participate in together. Terrence.
Yeah, I began writing at the age of 7 years old. I began seriously writing poetry at the age of 7 years old. And I was very fortunate that at the age of 5, a couple of years earlier, the Lord revealed to me what He wanted, what I was to do with my life. And it was just a very special moment in my life, and I have not had much of an opportunity to share that in this kind of forum. But I was fascinated by this tree, a little teeny guy. I was fascinated by this tree. It turned out to be a bush. And I would imagine that there was a little teeny man made out of wood that lived in this tree. And I must have seen Robin Hood because he was dressed like Robin Hood. And one day I went to find him, and I pulled the branches back, and I stuck my head in. It was a fir tree. It was real, all thick and sinewy branches. And he wasn't there. But all of a sudden, I became very much enamored with the beauty of that tree, 5 years old. And I remember distinctly feeling and thinking, I want to spend every moment of the rest of my life showing people how beautiful God's world is.
Wow.
And that could have only been the Lord to put that in my spirit. But fortunately, I had the blessing of attending a school, St. Joseph's Catholic School in Norfolk, Virginia, which no longer exists. And it was a black Catholic school, so all of the parents paid tuition, and we, those students, we are forever indebted to our parents because black people paying tuition back in those days, back in the 50s. But because money was always an issue, the school went from the 1st to the 12th grade, and whenever the 12th graders would graduate, we would put on these huge exercises where we would rent out the Norfolk Arena. Back in those days, what is presently the Harrison Opera House, on the front was the Center Theater, where the white people went, and on the back was the Norfolk Arena, where the black folks went. And we would sell out that arena every year as a part of the commencement exercises. And each grade in the school, from the 1st to the 12th grade, and then from the 1st to the 4th grade, there were 2 grades. We would all do a musical number or some skit or something. And that was my introduction to the theater. And we would order costumes from Los Angeles.
Wow.
You know, we had an incredible choreographer, director by the name of Gene Whitby that coordinated this entire thing. And again, that was my introduction to the theater. But I didn't pull everything together for what happened to me at age 5 and what happened to me as I was being introduced to the theater until some 22 years later, when I was living in Washington, D.C., and the Lord got to me again. It was an unusual circumstance. He used a number to get to me, and the number was 22. And I did all kinds of research about what this number meant, but it wasn't until I got to the Bible that I realized what it meant. And I read the entire New Testament, and I got to the book of Revelation. And in the book of Revelation, of course, the book of Revelation talks about the end of one phase and the beginning of another, which is what the number 22 means. The 22nd chapter of the book of Revelation is the final chapter of the Bible. And in it, the Lord says in verse 13, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And that's what he was telling me that he represented in my life. That was in 1978. I wrote my very first play for the Love of Jazz in 1978. And from there, I've just been on this remarkable run. And it's been a blessing because for me, frankly, it really truly is all about service.
Where'd you get your formal training?
Formal training, well, I attended Old Dominion University for a while. as a theater education major.
Okay.
I also was an art major because when I was exploring the arts, I started writing poetry at 7. I started drawing at about the same age, and I started playing musical instrument, not real good at like you, a few years later. But at Norfolk State, I was a art education major.
Okay.
I later switched to a theater education major at Old Dominion University. But I think that in a spiritual scheme of things, my formal training came from the Lord because He deposited that creative spirit in me. And it's a gift that I feel obliged to return. A great influence on me was my father. My father was a writer. And I have a library of books that my father gave to me on writing. But back in the 10th grade, I was reading a poem. And that poem, in school, that poem spoke to me in such a way that it was like the words on the page, I kid you not, it was like the words on the page were illuminated. And when I read those words and grasped them and understood what the writer was saying, it really revealed to me that what I started doing at 7 years old as a writer is exactly who I was. And that poem was by William Cullen Bryant, The Stanatopsis. Ironically, it's a poem about death, but not in a morbid sense. But shortly afterwards, I discovered James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. And that was when I realized I was an African-American writer. But probably the greatest influence on my writing was Rod Serling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of his imagination. And also he wrote about cultural things. And Rod Serling was ahead of his time because he wrote, a lot of his stuff featured things that dealt with diversity and equity. And I consider him as the Shakespeare of our time.
That's great. I never thought about it like that.
And you know, ironically, the very last edition of The Twilight Zone was one where Shakespeare appeared. Wow. And I never knew that until recently.
Wow.
Yeah, Shakespeare, the ghost of Shakespeare appeared in the final edition of The Twilight Zone.
So let me ask you a question. What's the first professional role, a job, or that you had as far as a screenplay or acting, or what do you consider yourself most? What do you consider yourself, an actor, a writer?
I consider myself a writer. I am attracted to acting, writing, and directing for 3 different reasons. An actor, you know, like musicians play musical instruments, a painter paints with a paintbrush on a canvas, and there are different types of art forms. But most of those art forms, you use a medium, whether it's a musical instrument or a paintbrush and so forth. But an actor has to use their entire physiological being to create art. They have to use their entire physiological being to become the art medium. And that is completely fascinating to me. And I like the challenge that it represents. Directing, the reason I like directing is because of the challenge as well. I would make the comparison of a director as being the conductor of a human symphony, and all the actors are the musical instruments. And the director has to conduct all of that to create a composition.
And the script is the music.
And the script is the chart, but the script is also the body of all of it. And the reason that I like writing is that when I sit down and write, I can create a world and populate it with people. And so the experience that I had as an actor at the DC Black Rep in terms of formal training, the experience that I had as an actor helped me develop and hone my writing skills, because to create a character on the page, you have to know how to craft character. You have to know that physical and spiritual sensation and the journey that an actor has to take. Ironically, when I went to apply at the DC Black Rep, I went to inquire about playwriting workshops. And they didn't have any at the time, but they were changing the DC Black Rep, which was founded by Robert Hooks. You remember Robert Hooks? Yes. They were changing the DC Black Rep, changing administration to the Rep Incorporated. and they were looking to develop a new repertory troupe, and they encouraged me to audition. And I'd never really done any acting previously, but apparently they liked the energy, and I was one of 8 people that they chose out of a field of people to be in the initial repertory. And brother, they worked us hard. We didn't have to pay anything to participate, but we paid with our flesh, with our minds, with our spirits.
Okay, so the question is, I know you're a native son of Norfolk, and you love Norfolk, and we all love Virginia, but where did you, is DC where you spent your some of your professional, tell us where you spent your professional years learning your craft and becoming the person that you are?
I would have to say it's Norfolk. DC provided me with a platform, okay, because I got that training, and beyond the DC Black Rep, I had the good fortune of being mentored and getting private coaching lessons from a gentleman by the name of Vladimir Chernozemsky. Vladimir was from Bulgaria, and he was a famous film producer and director who was working for, you know, the Soviet Union, and he escaped and came to the United States. But he really helped me with my writing. I'll never forget, he told me, he said, Terrence, if you're going to write about someone drinking rusty water, you have to write it so that the person that is reading it can taste rusty water.
Yeah.
Okay, so the DC Black Rep and Vladimir, whom I'm still in touch with today, they were kind of the thing that really launched me, and I made a spontaneous move back to Norfolk, Virginia. I hadn't planned to come. My eldest daughter was living back here with her mom, and I came down for a visit, and it was fate for this to happen. I came down for a visit, and she was at my parents' house when I was supposed to be leaving. And I looked at my baby in the door, and she was crying for her daddy, and I could not leave.
Couldn't leave.
No, and I made that decision back in January of '80 to move back to Norfolk.
Okay.
And things just really started happening. It was a fateful decision. I got my first commercial. It must have been like '81, making $250 an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, to portray. Yeah, to portray, back in those days, to portray a lieutenant commander down at where the Enterprise was docked in Norfolk. Put a brother in uniform, had real actors, real active duty guys saluting me, having no idea that I was fake, you know. But from there, I started a company called On-Key Productions. And by then, I had written, actually, I just had my first play for the Love of Jazz, and then I wrote another play called Victory Manor. We did Victory Manor there, and my company, we were the first people. You know the play, A Soldier's Play, the movie A Soldier's Story? It was based on the Pulitzer Prize winning play. I was the first person in Virginia to direct that play. And I started doing a lot of theater there with my company, On-Key Productions.
Okay.
And I must interject because we want to talk about your most recent project that Bill and I are so fortunate to be a part of. But you've touched on the arts. You've touched on your writing. You've touched on your acting. But Terrence, you have a vita that's about 7 pages. And if you could maybe, I don't know, bullet or just say 5 careers or 10 things that you've done, because our audience is not really getting the full effect of this man sitting between us. You've done so very much. So how could you summarize that in about a minute?
Again, I have been blessed, and I think I've been blessed because I'm really trying to give back to the Lord what He's given to me. I was hired with my wife and I, ex-wife, we had a brand new baby. And I was hired by the Smithsonian Institution to introduce a brand new video label across the nation. I was hired with no degree. Again, I've been blessed. And the gentleman that hired me, To tell the full breadth of how it came about would take a good little while.
So I have an idea. I'm gonna give you a topic, and then you tell me what you've done in it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Radio.
I haven't actually done a whole lot in radio, honestly.
Okay, I'm going to move from radio.
Okay.
Television.
I wrote, produced, and hosted a talk show for 16 years called Health Watch, produced by the local PBS affiliate, Norfolk WHRO, for the city of Norfolk and the Virginia Department of Health. And I had another talk show called Biorhythms that was just recently picked up by a new video streaming service.
All right. Work on commissions or boards?
I'm the chairman of the Norfolk Commission on the Arts and Humanities and the vice chair of the board of directors of the Huntington Y on the advisory council for the Hampton Roads Prostate Health Forum. I mean,
okay. How many plays have you written?
22. That number is
22.
That number I'm telling
you. Oh
you.
yeah, that's that number.
Okay. About how many actors have you worked with?
In total?
And mentored? Yes, in total.
Oh my God! In terms of actors that have been in my classes, probably about 100. In terms of actors that I've directed, easily 800-900.
Okay. All right.
Theater?
Okay.
Theater?
Oh, theater.
Yeah.
How many productions or performances?
I've directed about 50 productions. I've produced and directed in every theater in Norfolk, to include the Virginia Wells Theater, the Harrison Opera House, the Riverview Playhouse, the Chrysler Museum, every theater in Norfolk except Chrysler Hall and the Little Theater of Norfolk.
Okay, talk about your achievements and awards you've received. Tell us a few.
I did a documentary about men that have suffered the loss of their infant children, which is something that happened to me when I was a very young man. They won the Mid-Atlantic People's Choice Award, Mid-Atlantic Black Film Festival. I got an Alley Award awarded by the Cultural Alliance of Hampton Roads, a Portfolio Magazine Award from a magazine that no longer exists. And maybe this will make for a great segue into talking about the Black Walnut. Mm-hmm. I had the good fortune of being accepted in the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation fellowship program called the Culture of Health Leaders. And I am an alumni. We just got our pins. It was a 3-year program. And we all had to choose an area to work in. Mm-hmm. And I had already been doing a lot of advocacy work in prostate cancer. Again, I'm a prostate cancer survivor. And so I developed a project to increase awareness of the prostate cancer disparity impacting African American men.
Okay. And it is a great segue because now we're going to talk about the Black Walnut.
All right.
And I would love to share my experience, but let our audience know, how did you get to create a film that deals with prostate cancer awareness?
I wanted to do something that was different from standard documentary fare, because a lot of times when people hear the word documentary, their face glazes over. They don't want to take the time to see a documentary. You have to be a bit of a nerd like me to really want to have an appetite for documentaries. So because the disparity is so profoundly impacts the African American community, I wanted to come up with a tool, with a vehicle that would entertain and engage as well as enlighten. And so I created a work of fiction that, like a typical film, but it features 9 prostate cancer survivors, real prostate cancer survivors, like this gentleman here to my right, as actors in the film portraying themselves. And the whole idea, again, is to give the viewers, and without them even necessarily being aware of it, a great depth of information about the disparity. Because what we see, I don't want to say the whole thing was designed to be subliminal, but what we see, our subconscious mind retains. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hoping that, and from the feedback that I've gotten thus far, people are in fact motivated and inspired, and they get a lot of good information from the film.
Great, great. So if you had to summarize the film for our audiences, how would you summarize it?
There are principally 6 characters in the film. They're all prostate cancer survivors. 2 actors are portraying, one actor is portraying a fictional character. That's the lead character because I wanted that to drive the story. And another actor is portraying someone else out of Chicago whose health was precluded his coming into town. So these 6 coming into town to shoot. So these 6 different prostate cancer survivors, they all receive letters from this organization, the Black Walnut Foundation, which is a fictional foundation. Right now.
Right now, I was going to say.
I might have to create. I was talking about that today and creating an actual Black Walnut Foundation. Absolutely. But they all receive letters from this foundation that says that they will cover all of their medical expenses and give them a healthy stipend if they commit to certain conditions. And the conditions, I don't want to give away too much of the film, but the conditions, they, with some reluctance and discussion, they decide to satisfy these conditions, and they go about the business of recruiting people. They become ambassadors to disseminate the message about the disparity that's impacting African American men. And the whole idea is that for people that see the film, whether they're prostate cancer survivors or people who have had prostate cancer survivors in their families, some kind of way impacted by the disease, that they will themselves become ambassadors. I've had 3 screenings of the film, sneak previews. It's 95% done now, but I've had sneak previews in Washington, D.C., in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the A. Philip Randolph Institute National Education Conference, and in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, an event that was staged by the University of Alabama, Birmingham, the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center. And if those reactions are, and the feedback that I'm getting, are any measure of how things are going to go with the film, it would do well, because a lot of these people are already becoming ambassadors to disseminate that message.
Well, I will tell you, based on my experience in the film, and I would like to thank you publicly for giving me, I guess I can call a featured role.
Yes, ma'am.
As Davina Dade, and I can't wait for our audience to see the film. I'm a true ambassador. I'm asking men all the time, do you know what your PSA is? And they're looking at me like, what is she talking about? But they know, and they're appreciative. So I thank you. I've been spreading the word, and every time I have a conversation about it, there are men in that area that are prostate cancer survivors. So Bill, why don't you talk about
let me chime in on that and jump in on. I was talking to Dr. Burt Terrence about something that we were doing either with this program, with Listen Up, or either something with our Virginia State connection, and she was sharing with me that she was doing this movie. And I was going like, movie, for real? She said, it's about prostate cancer survivors. I said, well, did you know I was a prostate cancer survivor? And she really didn't, per se. I think she may have heard it in passing, but it hadn't dawned on her that we were talking. And because of Bert knowing that, she hooked me up with you, and I ended up taking, I think, your role in the, at least, taking your role in the movie, and things expanded from there. But in not just talking about the movie, let's talk about how you had, what it took to put that together as far as resources, partnerships, and things like that. Because a lot of people, you know, especially young people, when they think about making a movie, they think it's all about just getting a bunch of money and shooting a film. But you can tell them for sure that it's a whole lot more than that. Tell us a little bit about the logistics of how you did it and some of the places that we were filming, because what a lot of people will see in this movie is a lot of locations that you don't normally get in a production where there's not a whole lot of money involved. So you were very resourceful and blessed to have some locations, and I want you to share with us, because those people who assisted you are very much a part of trying to get the message out. So tell us a little bit about that.
There were well over 100 people that touched this project. And before I go any further, I need to acknowledge my dear brother, Greg Boyd.
Yeah,
who
Greg,
was,
definitely.
Director of photography and editor. And we talk about jiving together creatively.
Sure.
It was just incredible. It was fantastic. The funding, the seed funding for the project came from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the fellowship that I mentioned earlier, and the Culture Health Leaders Program, because we all had to come up with a project. And there were 40 of us, and they kicked each of us $35,000 for seed money. But in terms of the locations and so forth, I've been in the Norfolk community for a while, and there are a lot of people that know Rebertha and know my work. The cemetery scene, the opening scene that takes place in the cemetery, the mayor's office got this cemetery for me.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a young brother by the name of Adisa Muse, who's now the deputy city clerk. He got that for me. And a city councilwoman, the scene that we shot on the top floor of the executive conference room in SunTrust, with the law firm. A city councilwoman made those arrangements for me. There's a truck stop scene. I actually just called them up and said, hey,
can I come
I'm
shoot
doing
them?
this film,
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and they didn't charge anything. There's a scene in the barbershop, and that's the only scene that I'm in. I do a cameo. I do not like, when I am doing a film, I don't do everything behind the camera. But I reached out to a woman that I've known for quite a long time, who owns that salon, Shades of Beauty. The courtroom scene, Judge Gerald Jones, who was a delegate, but in the House of Delegates. I've known him for a while. We run into each other on the street all the time, mostly at restaurants getting lunch. But he was the chief judge.
Okay.
And so we had lunch one day, and I said, you know what I'm doing? And I told him what I was doing. I need a courtroom. He said, well, let me see what I can do, Terrence. And he got the sheriff involved, Sheriff Joe Barron. I'm a member of the Norfolk Democratic Party, and so I know Joe Barron from there. And that's how we got the sheriff's deputies, the court.
So those were real deputies. They weren't.
Oh, they were real deputies.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
They were real deputies.
As well as your doctors.
Yes, my urologist, my new urologist appears, Dr. Ifeanyi Ani, and a medical oncologist. One of the agencies that actually serves as my sponsoring organization for the final year of the fellowship was the Greater Norfolk Medical Society of Southampton Roads. The president of the medical society, which was my doctor, was a woman I went to high school with.
Wow.
Okay, Dr. Angela Mercer, and she is a constant ally and a very, very supportive physician. And Dr. Shabazz is who's the other physician that appears, the oncologist, medical oncologist, is a member of the Greater Norfolk Medical Society of Southampton Roads.
And you know, Terrence, I'm sure I can speak for all of us, the cast as well as the crew, to be involved in a project that could ultimately save lives was just so touching for all of us. Each time I was in the presence of shooting, and again, thank you, because that was my first opportunity to serve as a producer. But each time I was in the presence of the filming, you could just feel the spirit of what we're doing is going to make a difference. Now, of course, we were excited about the acting opportunity, but more excited about we are going to actually help save lives and to become knowledgeable about the disparity in our community. That was interesting, very interesting for me. And we know we hear with lots of diseases and lots of illnesses about the disparity amongst people of color. But just to really know about how if men are screened early, just how successful the rates are for a cure. So thank you, and I know I speak for crew and cast.
Absolutely. I had a friend actually that was funeralized today who died from prostate cancer.
I'm so sorry.
A dear friend of mine too. But let me ask you a question, and need you to kind of like summarize what it is that you want people to know about The Black Walnut as a movie, as a project, and just tell them why it's important for them to support, and just because of your heart and because God has led you to do this. Just tell us what we need to know about the film The Black Walnut.
I have, from my own personal experience, seen how awareness can create a good outcome, awareness of the disease. I was telling someone earlier that when I was diagnosed in 2010, neither one of my brothers had ever been screened. Mm-hmm. They both were insisted that they were screened. My eldest brother was screened, and he was diagnosed with the later stage prostate cancer than myself. During the filming, I don't know if you're aware of this, but during the filming, 2 people went to get screened that had never been screened before.
Wow, that's great.
And so we talk about the disparity. African American men are 1.7 times the rate of any other ethnic group, to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. African American men die from prostate cancer at a rate 2 times, more than 2 times that of white men, of non-Hispanic white men. Hampton, Virginia has the highest diagnosis rate in the state of Virginia. Portsmouth has the highest mortality rate.
Right.
The significance about those 2 statistics is that both Hampton and Portsmouth are predominantly African American cities.
Sure.
You know, so that's why that disparity exists. So when people see the film, I want them to be informed, and again, I want them to realize the implications of the disparity, the consequences, the personal consequences for people that are diagnosed as well as their families, and the role that women play in men's health is absolutely essential. You know, and so I would like for people to themselves, as I alluded earlier, to become ambassadors to continue to disseminate that message. One thing I also would like to see is for Black men to participate in clinical trials.
Yes.
We are not aware why the disparity actually exists. The National Institutes of Health just last year launched a $24.5 million study called Respond to do a study of 10,000 African American men to see if they can determine why the disparity exists. So the main thing really is to just get the word out, to get brothers to be proactive in their own health care.
Terrence, I don't know how to say it, but I want to thank you very much for all that you've done and all that you're going to do in the future, because this is just one step in that mission that you have, that God has given you since you were 5 years old. That's a blessing. Absolutely. And I want to thank you for having the opportunity to speak with you here, and for the opportunity that you provided for us to be on film. You know, this is my acting debut, and I want my Hollywood Walk of Fame over here.
And I'm going to be next to you, Bill.
I appreciate it. And we just thank you also for including my music in the film.
Oh, absolutely. 2-time Grammy nominated.
Hey, I appreciate it. So I want to thank you, and Dr. Bird, we just want to thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us.
Thank you both.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, well, that does it for Listen Up a Minute. This has been a great segment. We hope you enjoy it. And furthermore, we just want all of you to be ambassadors for prostate cancer awareness, and to make sure you see the film, The Black Walnut.
Yes.
Bill and I are in it.
That's right.
Peace. Good night, you guys. If you're interested in hosting the film, The Black Walnut, please contact Mr. Affer Anderson. with the information that's provided below. There are two primary conditions for full participation in the Black Walnut Project. First, each of you must agree to an on-camera testimonial chronicling your individual prostate cancer journeys. This information will be used by the Black Walnut Foundation to create a documentary film about the African American prostate cancer disparity.
I pledge to be the change I want to see in my community. Register and vote.
I pledge to vote in all elections, local, state, and national. Vote.
I pledge to always remember people suffered and died for the right to vote. Vote.
I pledge to always remember we, the people, have the power. Vote.
I pledge to always remember to make a change. Vote.
I pledge to remain in school until I graduate. Register and vote.
I pledge to remain a law-abiding citizen and protect my right to vote.
I pledge to always demonstrate respect for myself and others. Vote.
I pledge to get out the vote.
I took the Get Out the Vote pledge. What about you? Vote.
Take the pledge.
Take the power.